Hello future tech leaders, I am Sindhuja. Based on my own experience, I know that learning the right skills can shape our future. What if I say learning was as thrilled as the tech world itself? There we go. A cloud foundation, that's exactly what you will experience. From day one, you will be immersed in the interactive sessions and expert-led courses that covers most of the widely used technologies in the zone of data science to cloud computing, which brings more light to the life of a techie. I'm so excited to help you and unlock the true potential of a technology. Well, then why to wait? Let's see what it unfolds.
So CI/CD stands for continuous integration, continuous deployment, or continuous delivery. So this is the concept to automate our application deployments. Usually deployment is a little complex procedure. You need to take different things to deploy. So if you are doing that manually, sometimes the guy who is doing that procedure may miss some steps. Nopra. And sometimes the application will work, but due to the misconfiguration, it will not work as expected. So if you automate this procedure in a more systematic manner, the deployments are very stable and very fast. So that is the idea of this concept. In our projects, usually in real time, there are multiple environments. So we have the development environment to develop the applications, and we have the test environment to test and to assure the quality of application is good. We have the UAT environment, and some people call this as a pre-production. This is some kind of standard structure followed in most of companies. Some companies may have a staging environment. Some companies may have only dev, test and prod. There are no fast and hard rules like we should follow, like this only. So it depends upon company financials, company standards. They follow different kinds of environments. So when we have different kinds of environments, we need to deploy our application to different environments. Deploy to development, deploy to QA, deploy to pre-production and deploy to production. So what is our strategy to deploy our applications to different environments? How are we to follow that strategy? So this strategy mainly requires each environment. For each environment, we have a source code repository. Majorly, this source code repository is very important. Most of companies use Git or Bitbucket as a source code repository. And where we actually our sources resides, right? What we call core resides. So in source code repository, we have different branches for different environment. For development, we manage all the development coding branch called develop. And all test environment. The release branch. Most of this production called master branch. This is standard terminology used across the industry. All companies use master as a production branch. So anybody, each entity, each organization, each company, they will have a Git repository, right? Yeah, Git repository. And all the staff, all the developers, they have access to developers, master and all that. Is that correct? Developers have limited access to repository. They don't have access to the master repository. Most people, they have the access to develop repository. Sorry, develop branch. So all the developers can deposit or store. They can use that and get to reposit, right? Whatever the project they're working on. Yeah. Alright? And anybody in that group has, will need to have access. Development team mostly have access to develop branch and some people have the access to release branch. But usually we won't get access to the production branch. Sorry, master branch. Okay, so usually admin only the kind of DevOps team. They have access to master branch. So they will manage this master branch, merging all the stuff, right? So to develop anything, what we need to do is we need to branch. We need to make our own branch, develop branch. Right? This is, you want to develop some small projects here. Application or whatever you need to already. The code is there. You want to do some kind of enhancement. You need to branch, develop branch with some add-on code, something like that. And you develop that application, and once you finish your task, do one thing, right? Do one thing, you create a pull request. Something called pull request. Pull request means you are saying I am done with my task. Yes, you use this code. If it is fine, you can merge this code to develop branch. You create a pull request. You need to give the reviewer name. Who want to review your code? Probably the application architect or some guy, the peer reviewer. He will give you the code. Okay, this code is up to mark and everything is good. Then you can merge your code, to the actual develop branch. So that person knows MuleSoft well. Yes, that should be, because if you develop the code in MuleSoft, that person should know the MuleSoft. What standard? How you develop? If you have any question, he can come back to you and ask the question. Okay. And something like that. Sometimes developers have access to development directly where they can push the changes to the develop branch. That depends upon company to company how they follow that. Yeah, right. So it is one of the most important part where we decide all our sources. So when you want to deploy to the development environment, we need to take the code from the develop and we need to develop to the develop environment. So I just mentioned we have the 4 environments. Yeah, we have develop environment, test, environment report and production environment. So from the branches, from the master branch, it will depend on the production environment. Always master branch. Master branch is the final branch, where we manage always the consistent, stable code. So it will go to the production environment release branch it will boot to the test environment. And develop branch, it will develop environment. So when a code commit happens to the develop branch, somebody commits a code. Somebody, if Adam created a code and Adam sent a code request. So he's reviewing something called John. John approves the Adam code and John merges the code to the develop branch. So when the code comes to develop branch, what our strategy is, and automatically a process needs to run and try to deploy this code to the development environment in our runtime. Okay. So how this process happens? So for that you need to have an idea of the Git. That is the first process. What's the Git commits? Push git pull request. That is the first step. Right. First step, you need to hide the Git because the source of our source code is the repository from where we are getting the code right. So this is the one. The second thing is the most important thing is you need to understand about. Today my goal is about this thing. I will explain this thing. And next I given some code, some article to install Jenkins right. Hope you install right. I think I might play with Jenkins way back. And I'm thinking I might already have it in my system, no problem. Keep it. So we'll connect all the dots in this weekend session. Right now I'm explaining about dots. We can talk about dots. The first dot, you need to learn about the Git. It is the first dot. Okay, so you need to know about Git commands. Some little more. Like how to commit the code to Git. What is the local repository? What is the remote repository? Git is some kind of distributed source code management. So every developer has its own repository. And there is one central repository where all the developers' code resides. So have understanding of local repo, central repo. If you don't have this concept, there are numerous articles and numerous videos available on the internet. Please go through that thing and try to, do some Git practice. Some do any small example project. You should not be in any kind of simple source and try to commit the code and try to push the code to the remote repository. Simple practice on the Git, right? And second thing, you need to know how to create environments in Vue software. Okay. How to create environments in Vue software. And here you need to create the branches. How to create branches also. Create a branch. Create a branch in Git. You need to have some idea of what is a branch and how to create a branch and how to merge the branch. Only that is the idea you need. Right, Adam? Yeah. So this part, please you take care. If you have any questions, I will be happy to help you and explain you that I can't explain from the start point of the Git. So you take care of it, and if you have any queries, I can help you on the process. And I would like to start with the Vue software area. That is how to create environments in Vue software runtime. So this is the second step, because if you know the environment, how to create an environment, then you can be able to push the environment. Right, so this is one. And third concept is you need to have an idea of the EPA gateway. What is EPA gateway concept? You call it EPA gateway. Okay. And the fourth concept, you need to have how to configure environments in Vue application. So what are you saying like environments? Are you talking about inside the Git or are you talking about the MuleSoft? MuleSoft inside the Git, you need to create different branches. For development, you need to create a develop branch. Just you need to know how to create a branch in the Git. That is different. So that is not related to MuleSoft. In this branch, you can store doctored code, Python code, any kind of code you can store in the Git. So in the Git end, you need to know how to get a branch. So we created a separate branch for each environment. So in like for companies, they only have dev branches, right? So they're only going to give you the path, right? Yeah, exactly. You're not going to create unless you know. If it's already there, you use it. If it's not, you will create. You need to create branches in the Git. By default, you create a repository. It comes with the master branch in the Git. So you need to create other branches like develop branch, test branch, and to create in the Git. So just to explore about how to create a branch in Git. It is a generic topic. And of course, you get an idea about the Git branches. And the second tip is how to create a MuleSoft environment. That I will be going to create a MuleSoft. It's very simple. You create a MuleSoft environment in a platform. An API gateway is a little important topic. And I will tell you how to create an API gateway. What is an API gateway? That's the topic. And third thing is how to configure environment in MuleSoft application. Get doubt what is second step and what is fourth step. Right. Second step is creating an environment in MuleSoft platform, any one platform. So this is a platform where we are going to deploy our application, right? There is a development environment, test environment, and production environment. I see there are three environments. We can deploy application to development, to test, or to production. How to create this box inside the MuleSoft platform, where we can deploy our applications. So here how to configure environments in a MuleSoft application. So this is a part when you're creating an application, you need to tell the application that okay, development environment lies at this point. Test environment will configure at this. And production configure. If you provide these details in the application, when you deploy this application, right, you know what environment we will deploy. So this part has all the details of where the development environment is and what is username and password to connect to that environment. It's all the details. So the application will get deployed to the development environment. So this is where we create the environments and this is where we configure the environment inside the application. So then the fifth thing is you need to configure something called automating tool That is called Jenkins. Jenkins is a guide where we are writing all the steps how to fetch the resources from the Git and where to deploy. All the steps we can write in Jenkins. So this is where we write something called pipeline. I can show you how to write a pipeline, how to automate that. So long way, and today we create a simple MuleSoft environment and little bit about APEC gateway. That's the concept I want to focus today. Okay. How to create an environment in MuleSoft. So MuleSoft, everything is in the Anypoint platform. Right. So let me open the Anypoint platform. What is the URL to open Anypoint platform? Anypoint.mulesoft.com. So when you log into this Anypoint.mulesoft.com, you will create a report and you can log in. You can see the dashboard of this Anypoint platform. So in the dashboard, something called Big Box. This is Management Center. This is the segment where you can manage your Anypoint platform. So in the Management Center, there is one button, this Access Management. Right? Access Management. You can see the different parts in the Access Management. You can create a new user. You can create a new roles. You can create an environment. You can configure the authentication providers, client providers, logs, so on. So there are several things on the load. Oh. So today our goal is you need to create the new environment. For that you go for the environment. You go for environments. By default you can see. Actually by default if you open your thing, right? You can see only two environments, design and sandbox. But as part of my applications, I created two more environments. If you want to create a new environment, Add Environment button is there. Add Environment. And what kind of environment is this? Production, sandbox and design. So for us, we can't create the production environment because our account is a free account. To create a production environment, you need to have the official use of license. So, as we don't have that license, we need to create a sandbox environment. And we can give the name as production. That's the difference. We can give the name as production. This is the only name. Just label. The product, simple function. Create. The prod environment. So likewise, simple thing. Go to Access Management and add environments and add the environment. Right? If you open that environment, I just added the prod environment. If you open the prod environment by clicking this link, and you can see the client ID and client secret. So this is the unique credentials for this environment. These things you require. If you want to deploy anything to the production environment, you need to use this client data and client secret in your automatic process. So that will be able to connect and able to deploy. Right. Got it, Adam? Yeah, I got it. Okay, so this is required. So likewise, if you want to deploy to the dev environment, you need to give the dev credentials. How to connect to dev environment? That's right, and client secret of the dev environment. So the fundamental is for each environment you created, there is a credentials got created automatically. You need to provide those credentials if you want to deploy application to that environment. That is the fundamental. That's right. So the first step is done. This is very simple. Create environment by giving environment name. So next step is you need to learn about API gateway. So what is API gateway? This is little interesting, little important concept. Yes. So when you are developing your applications, right? But suppose you are developing some application. So when your client provided the application requirements, there are two kinds of requirements usually. One is called functional requirements. Functional requirements. And the second is non-functional requirements. So anytime you heard about these things, Adam, functional requirements, non-functional requirements. Functional, yeah. So I think I may understand this. So functional requirement is that the mandatory features that the application should have, right? Fantastic. This mandatory business requirement. Mandatory business requirement. So this is satisfied. The core of the customer requirement is satisfied. This is if you want to develop some kind of calculator. If you pass the two numbers, you need to return the sum of that two numbers. If you do that coding, that is called functional requirement, right? So then, what are non-functional requirements? Yeah, so it's opposite of that, right? There are some features. And my application has, but it's not. It's good to have it, but it's not required. You know what they call that. It's maybe talking about performance. So if you do the two numbers and you do the returns, the return is written after 10 minutes. There's no use, right? You expect the result within fraction of seconds, right? So that expectation, the performance, is one of the non-functional requirements. And security. Yeah. So, and proper logging means if your application fails, we need to troubleshoot and we need to know the reason immediately. If you do the proper logging, you can find out the reason. If you don't do proper logging, you have no clue about that error, right? So it's very tough to identify the error. So performance, security, logging, transaction management. These are all comes under non-functional requirement. So in this case, we're using this term is like a functional requirement and non-functional requirement to separate what application does versus what other things the application might need to function. Right? So when you develop the application, we need to focus majorly on functional requirement and we address non-functional requirement also. We're not saying that non-functional requirement is not my responsibility. I won't focus. Your client won't satisfy if you want to satisfy both, right? So they are both important. Exactly, both important. Then how can, if you do one thing, if you separate the functional requirement and non-functional requirement, if you ask your developers to focus only on some kind of functional requirements, and you separate all the non-functional requirements. All these things for our security. And you can add this non-functional requirement to your code if you want to remove that. This is called a kind of policy in use of time. What is called policy? So policy is a non-functional requirement. Those I can add to this code. I can remove this non-functional requirement. We have some kind of example, right? So I can put this non-functional requirement in a place that is called API gateway. So how we are managing this kind of infrastructure in Mule? So in Mule, what happens is when you create an API. So where do you create an API? In Mule software, there are you can say two planes. One plane you call as a control plane. And second plane, we have the runtime. So runtime plane with all Mule server. Maybe it may be Cloud Hub. Maybe standalone. So where actually your Mule application is running. We have deployed a Mule application that is taking your system server resource running. This is called server actually, right? It may be running in the cloud or running on your own private cloud or running on the standalone or running on the Kubernetes cluster. Whatever way your application is running and taking the memory and CPU resources. That is called runtime plane. So control plane usually is a cloud hub where we control this application. Control plane is a place from where we control application. So we need to deploy application, we need to undeploy application, we need to add the policies, we can remove the policies, whatever thing we can do. We are managing the application from a place called control plane. Runtime plane is a place where actually the application is running, taking the resource of the CPU, memory, all the stuff and is running. That's called runtime plane. MuleSoft is divided into two parts, control plane and runtime plane. So in the control plane, we have a design center where we develop an application, where we design an API. From design, what we do? We will publish the API to the exchange. I showed you how to publish the API to exchange from the design center. Event exchange. Yeah. When you publish an API from the design center to exchange, there is one unique ID created for this API. That is called a PD. For each API you publish to the exchange, there is some unique ID got created, okay? So to manage this API, there is one more section called API Manager. Yep. API Manager is a place where you manage API. So if you create an instance of this API in API Manager, you can see this API instance ID. What ID for that content? It is a Unity. So what you need to do is, when you create an API, that API has one unique instance ID. So the application is actually running in the runtime manager in the runtime plane. Okay, the application is actually running in the runtime plane. In the runtime plane, what I can do is the application has two requirements. One is take the application. Oh, so take the application, right? So it has the application. You need to talk to your control plane. So for that, I've shown you one time. I think you remember that is something called agent. Agent, right? Agent, runtime agent. Okay, so agent is the component that is talking to your control plane. When you want to deploy, you just send an agent. The agent will take care of that. So we have agent, we have the functional code, actual code, functional code in the application. And the fundamental is, so you develop an application for this API, but this is customer API example. Customer API, and in the endpoint, do you develop the customer API MPL and deprive that customer API MPL to the runtime? Here in the cloud app example, it is a customer API. Implementation. Right. And if you want to apply any policy to this application, or if you want to remove any policy, if you want to add a new caching kind of policy or security policy, any policy, you need to communicate with this ID because your API manager is, this is the ID, right? Okay. If you put this ID inside your application, then what happens is this API manager is able to add these policies to your application. It's able to communicate using this unique ID. You need to add this unique ID to this application. This is the channel or bridge. Your API manager is able to add policies or remove policies to the application running in the runtime. Right. So this ID we call as an API auto discovery. Auto discovery ID. Why this API auto discovery ID required is, it forms a bridge between your API manager and the application running in the runtime frame. and in the cloud. So what we do is, while deploying this application to the cloud, you add this ID inside this application and you deploy this application to the cloud. Before deploying itself, you take the ID from the Runtime Manager, API Manager, and add that ID to your application and deploy application to the cloud. So it sees right, if its ID matches, then it will manage this application. It's able to add the policies, remove the policies, and what it does. This is the ID as a bridge. Okay, so let me quickly implement this. I can show you so that you can understand. What I can do is I can simply create a simple API. Go to the Design Center. New application. I am developing something called Student API. Oh, I am simply creating one simple resource called Students. Students. Simple AP. And I want to publish this API to the exchange. So we publish and publish the exchange. So the request is 1.2.0. Exchange. Okay, once you publish the exchange, I'm going to API Manager. So I want to manage this API. So for that I need to register this API over here. Then only I can able to manage. So API Manager, add API and add new AP. And from the new gateway. First gateway is very new concept. Okay, we'll discuss later. This is a new gateway. A new API gateway embedded in the new runtime. I told right, new runtime, new gateway is embedded. So get to embed in new runtime and directly to existing new application. Right. So new gateway. And I'll discuss this proxy also a little after this one. Add to the existing application. Basic endpoint. Which API do you want to? I want to System API. Student System API. This is the one, right? So it's already knows it. You want to do anything like you can do. Everything is optional. You can go back. It's optional. So once you configured, once you registered, right, when API is created, it's called API instance. This is called a hotkey. So I'm come back to my AnyPoint Studio. I want to create an application. Soft project. And the project name is a student. Yeah. Are you important? Yeah, I'm putting that one. Oh, my design center. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project. Students. Yeah. So if you see the design center right for here, the status is under the start. And this image is not running. Actually, you see, it is called under the start, nothing is running. Right. So let me see a walk deployment to the runtime. Finish. My simple project. My goal is not about the project. My goal is about the how to discover an API. Oh, what I'm doing is I want to apply this to the Cloud Hub. Before that, I want to apply to Cloud Hub. How the API manager know this application running in the cloud. So for that I need to add some auto discovery. I need to add some auto discovery. Okay, so I'm going to add some auto discovery. 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 Yeah, we get that from. So this is when you feel it's time to say, okay, this one. Now I want to apply this to the Cloud Hub. So I pick one. Cloud Hub. It's so many components, my friend. Yeah. Oh my trial got ended. I need to create a new account. I do configuring and all the. So I create a new account in the next class, man. It takes another 15 minutes to get all this stuff again. Yeah, that's fine. hopefully when we have. We'll go through this maybe another time when we have a real case. But this is really what I'm finding out, my friend, is that not only you need to be good at MuleSoft, but also you have to also know all this other stuff that you like to deploy in a different environment. And there's so many other components that are in the play. Yeah. If you practice the 2 or 3 applications but deploying different environments, then it's easy, right? It becomes easy. So talk to me and I have a question. And way back we discussed, and I heard also, I read somewhere else and I think you mentioned as well way at the beginning that the nice thing about the Mule is that it has a way that for example, like a different, I don't know they call it, I don't know, it's a different level of connectivity, right? So they say application connectivity platform and connectivity experience connectivity. So yeah, you are talking about API and connectivity. System layer, process layer, experience layer. Yeah. So what are we talking about in that situation? Like when we're doing get and post. Are we saying that? I don't know. That is a complete architecture concept, one level above what we're doing now. So we develop different kinds of APIs. Yeah, maybe process API, system API, and experience API. So whatever APIs you are developing has to deploy in your runtime, right? In your production server, right? Yeah. So you want to deploy it, what level it follows? See if you have a system API. The system API has a development environment. It's the same system API input to production. Some test and production. So all these API connectivity layers has presence in development, test and production. Okay, so say that when we're connecting to a database, we're doing database connectivity. At that level, we're doing system API. Yeah, database file system MQs. And this is what is all new different system, layer system. In then the process layer, you may come to different system layers. You get data from different system layers and you can merge them and build them one big node, right? So that's the process layer. What is the experience layer? Experience layer is specific to client. Some clients want only XML, I want XML. And some clients are requesting, I want only JSON. Some clients just send me the file. To serve that specific client, we will do a code how to send that interact with that specific client. That kind of API. We develop experience API. Some are mobile clients, some are web clients. Inside the web, some people have different media types. So based on the customer and client. So we develop the experience APIs. And finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.